Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
Hey everybody, Tom Dutta, like Butta, the Quiet Warrior. How you doing? So many things are happening on the Quiet Warrior Show, with the studio is booked out every week for the next 3 months. My goodness, I got to thank you, because it's because of what you do, coming and listening to our great guests. We do storytelling here. What are we doing? We're live streaming. That's next generation of podcasting. Today we're on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, and Rumble. So if you're there and there's a chat feature, you can write a comment or a question. I'll see it in the dashboard. We'll try to bring it onto the show and stump the guest. But I want to set this up with a hook. This is something a little bit different. I want to share a little story with you here, and then we'll introduce you to our guest. Today's guest embodies what happens when childhood chaos becomes rocket fuel for transformation. When I first reached out to Blair LaCorte, his response was polished and professional, the kind of bio you'd expect from someone who'd led companies worth billions across entertainment, aviation, technology, and AI. But when I pushed deeper, something extraordinary happened. He wrote to me this. He said, "In my mind, this is all storytelling." And then the corporate veneer cracked open to reveal the real journey. Picture a young boy shuttling between two divorced entrepreneurial parents in adjacent towns, but worlds apart economically. One household with a small airline business in an old Victorian with manicured flowers, looking wealthy on the outside. The other, a father running a recruiting firm in a tough neighborhood, saving every penny for his son's college education. Both homes ran on that terrifying eat what you kill business model. Both homes experienced the volatility that came when business becomes personal. Both taught him to navigate family events where there wasn't some crisis or need for facilitation. This child, who never wanted to be an entrepreneur, would go on to oversee a $1.5 billion IPO, train as a Virgin Galactic astronaut, and become vice chairman of the world's leading longevity research organization. But here's what makes his story worth the Quiet Warrior Show appearance. At the height of his success, his marriage collapsed, echoing the very pattern he had spent his life trying to escape. Despite giving his wife all the money anyone could need, quote, he watched as alcohol and self-destruction threatened not just his happiness, but his child's safety. So this titan of industry did something remarkable. He stepped away for it all, stepped off the track, as he puts it, to protect his kids for 10 years. Only then, after rebuilding from emotional devastation, did he find the space to appreciate and take care of myself, and discover that the skills he'd been using to help business teams succeed could finally be applied to his own life without pressure. Today, Blair LaCorte mentors over 40 global CEOs, invests in transformative companies, and approaches the last third of life with a mission to help others grow and achieve peace, happiness, faster than he did. And as he wrote to me, it's not a zero-sum game. So prepare for a conversation that moves from boardrooms to broken hearts, from childhood wounds to cosmic perspectives, from business strategy to the ultimate question. What happens when we finally release the white-knuckle grip on survival and live for something greater? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, Blair LaCorte. Welcome, Blair.
Hey, thanks for having me. And wow, you took my breath away there. You know, it's when you say it out loud, it sounds very dramatic. But I appreciate.
I was just going to say, and man, you know, this is storytelling, and I'm just listening to your voice there and the inflection in you, and you're a guy with emotion. I was going to make fun of it and say, how was it like to sit there listening to you for 3 minutes?
Well, you know, enough about me. What do you think about me, right? You know,
exactly. Hey, Blair, do you want to go into Plato's Garden and have some fun today?
I would love to, as long as we're not going to do the allegory of the cave, the shadow of the shadow.
I have that book. I tried reading it. Man, is it ever dry. All right, stand by, everybody. Let's just put something on the screen here, and then we're going to get going into Plato's Garden. What would it like to be telling stories in Plato's Garden? Well, here we are in Plato's Garden, and for those of you who are watching the screen, you'll see this. On the audio, you'll hear me. Plato was an Athenian philosopher during the classical period in ancient Greece, founder of Platonic's school of thought and the Academy, the first institution of higher learning in the Western world. So what we're going to be doing, Blair, is we're going to be not talking heads today, but we're going to look at the influences of context of your life, man. We're going to look at three areas. One is macro. What was happening in the world around Blair when he created his public works? Maybe mezzo, what was happening in the sector where you do your work? And my favorite is micro. What was going on with you, the dude, Blair LaCorte? So let me take that off the screen and get us going. I'm going to position this and then we'll start talking. You've described your journey as having distinct phases, seeking safety, helping others, saying yes to opportunity. You've said business is just a sport we play. What were the family dynamics and all that stuff? We're really curious. So I'll put this out there. Let's riff on it. We'll say this is in micro. You grew up between two households with entrepreneurial parents, seeing both the public sector and private chaos. How did straddling those two economic worlds shape your understanding of what business really is?
Sure. And I'm not sure I really realized this until later in life as I tried to dissect why I made the decisions that I did and, maybe who were the influence in it. But, when you're in the fight, I don't think you think about yourself from the outside and think about the unfairness or the great things that are happening to you. I do think, however, that growing up with entrepreneurs, I was acutely aware of not having money or being dependent on getting the next kill for the rent did limit your ability to take risk. And I think that some ways becomes a weird dichotomy with entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs by definition are taking risks. But what I've seen is the best entrepreneurs in the world have this ability to pivot back and forth between what I'll call quick start, risk taking, being innovative, being able to pivot, being resilient to failure. But at the same time, you have to be a fact finder, because if you're not, you don't know how close you are to the edge, or you don't actually pay attention to what you really need to do, you go out of business. In fact,
Yeah.
there's a statistic that in the US, at least 1 out of 1 million companies that get started from zero ever get to $10 million for over 5 years. So it
Whoa.
is not that we have a lot of small startups, but to bring it over the edge, it takes a lot of discipline.
Yeah, wow. Those statistics are staggering. And I wonder, when you layer in COVID and that whole experience that shifted the world to having to digitize, and I wonder what happened even during that time. I was thinking about your childhood, reading some of the stuff that you wrote. I watched a couple of your interviews too. I made a note here. Wife was a psychotherapist. I think that's true.
My current wife is a
Okay.
psychotherapist. Yes, so it's
So I have something here I just want to throw out. I'm going to throw some things at you, curveballs. So you said start with you believing you love yourself and can be loved by someone else. This is an unconscious belief. It's big. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be intuitive when I say it, but it is one of the most difficult things that we face
Yeah.
as humans. Is we're designed for two things. We're designed for survival, and we're designed for love. So when you look at the way your brain processes information, we process information every 7 seconds. We basically take in 11 to 17 million bits of information every second, and we process about 100 to 150 bits of that, right? So in essence, our brain is taking down the amount of information we come in, either for survival or for confirmation bias, or to rerun patterns that we think are successful. And the idea around safety is predominant. It's predominant around both how you get to survive, but also how you find someone that actually loves you. And 80% of what we do every day is in our unconscious, because we're spending 100 to 150 bits on this whole idea of what we're consciously thinking about. And so what I was surprised when I really got into it, I partnered up with Jim Doty, who wrote Into the Magic Shop, and he was partners with the Dalai Lama, runs the Compassion Center in Stanford. And so he was a neurosurgeon before he became a philosopher. And we spent a lot of time thinking about what makes us feel safe. And the reality is that a lot of people can actually find people that they think love them. And they can also unconsciously say to themselves, well, I think that they will help me. And I've seen, evidence of that. The problem is if you really haven't learned how to love yourself or deal with your subconscious traumas, then subconsciously you still don't believe it. And so the real winner in life is someone who can accept compassion. But in order to accept compassion, you have to believe that you deserve it. And because we can't see it, a lot of times we ignore that, dealing with our subconscious insecurities really becomes the key to us unlocking our relationships with others.
Yeah, that's so deep. You sent me on a journey in my mind, man. So I'm just going to throw some things back that you evoked in me. This word safety is a big deal for me. And those who know my story, so I come from I hope I don't like the word broken, but my father was a military commanding officer in the British Army and then Canadian Forces when we came here. So I was born on a military base. My parents are from Fiji. My dad passed away in 2018. I miss him a lot.
Yeah,
But
sorry
he
for your
became,
loss. Yeah.
Thanks, man. But he became addicted quickly to alcohol and became chronically, and he was violent. And so our home got torn apart. And about age 12, he left. And everything that you can think of that comes with the raging alcoholic, physical, mental, I experienced that as a kid. It wasn't until later when I went into leadership and I became a CEO quite early in my career that I started having difficulty in relationships. And one of the things I struggle with, Blair, and is that I couldn't see the room the way it was. So if a guy like you is in the room talking to me and you raise your voice, my sympathetic nervous system kicked in and I started overstressing. And then my behavior changed. Well, I had some tough feedback once from a coach and I had to change that. And I did a lot of self-work. But today, especially after a concussion I had, I realized that the way my brain was shaped, and I studied neuroscience on this, and I'll give it back to you in a minute to give you a perspective. The way my brain was developed was different than other people. So I live a life where I think I call it the smoke detector, but my sympathetic nervous system is always on. And I have to do a lot of things to switch that off, hack the brain, etc. So let me just throw one more thing out, and then you can comment. So I call this the broken pattern. So after building success, you faced a personal crisis that echoed your childhood. How did that moment of devastation become a pivot point for your authentic transformation yourself?
Sure. And like, I want to definitely pick up on this. And what I'm going to say may sound narcissistic because I have a certainty in this. What we're just about to talk about is the most important thing you will hear today. Okay. What we're going to talk about will change your life for the better, or for the worse. And I truly believe that. And because what we're about to talk about is our coming to grips with who we are. And we don't in business and we don't in our personal life often do this because there's too much risk. So I'm going to talk about like a basic, if you're a psychologist, you know this, it's what you learn in your first year. It's called the Johari window, right? And the Johari window is around self-awareness, right? And it's a basic building block. It's kind of like accounting in business, right? It's
Yeah.
how you actually frame things so that you can start to work on them. And the Jory window talks on the top left. You look it up. There's many articles on it. Top left is what you actually present to the world. What you present to the world, your public image. What you know about yourself that you actually present out there to the world. Now, hopefully, most of it is authentic. Now, why is the Johari window so well defined? Because we're tribal beings. And our parasympathetic nervous system, as you just talked about, needs to know that we have a connection so that we feel safe, so that we can actually bond and we can recover. So there is the public image. Now, when you actually expand the Johari window, it's how you actually grow as a human being. If you push down and you say to the bottom left-hand box, you say, what haven't I told you that I'm going to tell you about myself so I feel like there's a continuity so that you can understand me? And that's called vulnerability.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, we can't be vulnerable about everything with everybody because they can't actually take that in. So we have to decide. If you look at the old classic study, Dunbar's number, which is you can connect to about 150 people emotionally at any given time in your life. Now, I don't think that that's linear. I actually think it's geometric if you work on it. And as you said, you reframe about how you do it. But that's vulnerability. So how can you know that they love you if they don't know you? And that's why earlier on we said, look, maybe I believe you're empathetic to me. Maybe I believe you're compassionate to me, but you don't know me. And that's what your subconscious is saying over and over again. Now, there's another vector when you go to the top right hand box, which means that someone will come to you and they'll be vulnerable and they'll tell you something about yourself that you didn't think about or you didn't believe. And that's your blind spot.
Yeah.
Those are the two vectors that you have to work on to be able to actually grow. Now, think about what those two vectors have in common. One is vulnerability, which means you have to connect with someone. And the other is someone coming to you and humbling you with what you don't know about yourself, which means you have to have connection and someone has to come to you. So some of us are introverts, some of us are extroverts, but it is absolutely universal that we need some level of connection with someone to actually be who we are and to die a fulfilled person. An introvert may only need one dyadic relationship at any given time. An extrovert may need more, but we need to learn how to connect. And I hope what we're going to talk about today is, the first level of calming your sympathetic parasympathetic system is how your mental health works. The second level is how you lead and how you work with your family, because if you feel good about yourself, you can actually work with other people. But the third is that the highest correlation to health span and longevity
Yeah.
is the management of your parasympathetic nervous system, which means you need safety. So the three most important things in your life all have to do with how you manage your parasympathetic nervous system. And we have a very difficult time with it because the opposite side to the coin of safety is risk. And your brain, as I said earlier, is designed to detect risk and to pull back. At the same time, it's looking for love, which is safety. So this is normal to have attention.
Yeah.
Cognitive dissonance creates flow, creates neurons, creates an ability for you to learn. So we were designed for this cognitive dissonance, but we tend to react through our amygdala much faster to fear than through our executive function, which is looking for logical ways to find love. And the way that those two things come together, again, I'll just say it one last time because you brought it up, is your parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah.
Now, I will tell you, even listening to you for 5 seconds, that your greatest strength and your greatest weakness comes from your interaction and connection with your father, because your greatest strength is that you can actually empathize and you're always on, which means you're looking to see how people are doing at any given time. And, if you dig deep enough, my bet is, and I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV, is that with alcoholics, especially violent alcoholics, you are searching to see the triggers so that you can dissipate it before the violence happens. So
Yeah.
you're always sensing everyone in the room to find out what's happening so you can control it, because your way to safety is to focus on mitigating that violent outburst. Now,
Yeah.
your biggest strength is also that you've been able to see things and do things and connect with people in a way that others thought, wow, that's amazing. So it's hard to say, the way your brain works is obviously, there's nature and there's nurture. The way your brain works, you wouldn't be able to do that unless you were designed that way. Every tribe has people who sit around the edge who actually look for things happening, right?
Yeah.
Or that in nurture, you took that piece of your brain and it was a tremendous focus on making it work better because it's the only way you could survive, right? So we all are who we are and who we hang out with, and who we want to be. And I would argue that as we get older, who we want to be has to be the place that we focus, because we have to work our way backwards from what's happened to us in nature and what's happened to us in nurture.
Yeah, well, that's like everybody come back to this segment, listen to it again. That's like an encyclopedia of knowledge on the sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system. I've had some fun with that through trying to explain it. And, those names are counterintuitive. So I was cooking a steak in my kitchen. I'm a home chef. And hopefully I don't offend anybody about eating meat. And my smoke alarm went off. And, my wife's there with a towel. She's doing this. We're trying to get it turned off. And that's how I refer to my sympathetic and parasympathetic. It's like the smoke alarm comes on, but it's only supposed to be on, Blair, for like 30 seconds to say, hey, you got a problem. But we got the stupid smoke alarm in our house that doesn't go off, even if you do this for about 5 minutes. That's what happens with me, is that thing stays on. I wanted to say thank you for a couple things. And I wrote a couple notes here. I've got a piece of paper that's growing with you on it. 3 things: mental health, how do we lead and work with others, management of that parasympathetic nervous system. So as we dig into the next piece of this journey, we'll get into more of that. I'm going to remind the audience that we're weaving through 3 areas of dialogue through storytelling. But what you want to do here, everyone, is do what's called critical thinking. As you're listening to Blair and I, particularly Blair, talk, as you find nuggets in each of those areas, connect the dots, and it'll give you a deeper meaning of what he's all about. I just wanted to throw a curveball at you again, and then we'll come back into the main flow. And so I asked you to bring a pair of sunglasses. Do you have those there?
I do.
All right, man, put them on. Let's look cool for a minute. I'm just going to take my headset off for a second. I'll explain all this. Hold on. All right, I'm just putting my, I'm going to have to take these off. Mine on, and I have one other prop here which you don't have, but I'll explain this. There it is. All right, everybody, what it would be like for me and Blair to be at an AC/DC concert. Well, I'll tell you something, Blair. My bucket list thing happened a few weeks ago. AC/DC came to Vancouver. 60,000 people filled the stadium. My wife and I went. When I was in high school, the basketball team would play the song Hell's Bells before the team came out. And I grew up listening to AC/DC, never seen them. Now, here's the reason I'm saying this, and I'm going to read something I heard you say. You said, movement and exercise. We need movement, not exercise. And then you said something about maintaining. So I'm going to just throw at you that when I went to AC/DC, if anybody knows that band, Angus Young, I think that's the proper saying of his name. He's a lead guitarist, and that guy does the struts across stage 2.5 hours at his age doing that. And they did encores and all that. I went, my gosh, if I get to that age, I want to be like those guys. That's longevity. But explain what you mean by you need movement, not exercise, and anything about longevity, because I know you're an expert in that area.
Sure. So I always, I'm a simple kind of guy, but I've been in a lot of industries. So what I've learned to do is learn and to put it into patterns that I can remember, right? Little models and little patterns. And then I can continue to learn because I know what I know. And if someone can convince me it's wrong, I know where to put it, right? And so in longevity, what we look at is the force multiplier. In the military, a force multiplier is something that impacts everything else in the theater. So, for instance, the ability to fuel planes in the air changes everything about how you take a look at something. It has a force multiplier on everything you do. In life, the force multiplier, as we talked about earlier, is connection. So every study that's ever been done, including the Harvard study over 80 years, is that if you have at least one dyadic relationship, a one-on-one relationship, that you believe that someone is compassionate to you, if you believe that you're connected to something bigger than yourself, a group of people, and if you believe you have purpose, all of the things that we talk about in longevity actually fit underneath them. If you don't have that top piece, the number one cause of mental illness under 25 is loneliness. The number one cause of death and chronic inflammation over 65 is loneliness. And the number one cause of violence and dysfunction in between is from loneliness. So under that, you'll recognize the 4 other pillars that get impacted. One is fuel. What do I put in my body? And is my body like that fuel? There's not one fuel for everybody. In diets, I've owned 2 diet companies. I can tell you it's on the normal curve. One diet doesn't fit everybody. The second piece was what we call movement. we're not designed to exercise. Well,
Yeah.
we're designed to move. We'd never exercised for thousands of years. We ran away from things and we ran toward things because we wanted to eat them. But that's kind of the point is that our bodies should not be static. The third is the whole idea of maintenance, which has to do with sleep and touch. And then the fourth is where you put your machine. Do you store it in a place that's corrosive, where there's pollution, where you use laundry detergent that is not organic and your clothes rub against you with chemicals every moment of the day? So those are the four easy ways to look at it. And, movement is one that I think people are surprised about. When you really look at the research around movement,
Yeah.
the three biggest things that would extend your life to get your 80%, one is moving 15 minutes every hour, because that's what they call it, the new smoking. Your body is not designed. The toxins sit in your joints, they sit in your organs. You just got to get up and walk around the table, right? The second is 10 minutes of HIT and 10 minutes of LIT. It's not 2 hours of CrossFit. Right? If you do that, that's fine, unless it's an overuse injury. But in essence, you just need to get your heart rate up over 85%. Jump rope 3 minutes, 3 times a day. You take a couple of sprints on your walk. If you do not get your heart rate up over 85%, can you imagine a machine that every day sits there and runs in the middle, but
Yeah.
never gets tested up? And LIT isn't just meditation. You could sit in the dark, listen to classical music for 10 minutes a day. If you do both in the same day, your machine goes up, your machine goes down, your hormones, your system biology manages itself, your immune system becomes stronger. So, that, to me, these are simple concepts. We own an amazing machine, and we need to actually put decent fuel in it. We need to move it every day. We need to maintain it. And it would be great if we put it in an environment that wasn't full of corrosive poisons. That's it.
Yeah. Awesome. Hey, everybody, a round of applause there for being cool. You can take those glasses off now, or you can keep it on. It's up to you. A little known fact, I told Blair as we were in the green room that many of the followers know, but some don't, that I had a concussion years ago, and so I have light sensitivity. You'll see me wearing those sunglasses. A little known unknown fact and nugget, if you like the band U2, you've heard of U2, right, Blair? The lead singer Bono
was just with Bono last month.
Wow, well, you got to share something about that. But he wears tinted glasses, and when I was struggling with light, he's had glaucoma for 20 years or so. I found this out through research, and photophobia or light sensitivity is a side effect of glaucoma. Mine's actually from falling on my head as a concussion. Let me get this hat off. Hold on. I love the band, but they're not going to pay me a royalty for wearing that thing the whole time. Oh man, we're learning lots. I know
it was actually the first concert I ever went to in the Boston Garden. For those of you on the East Coast, the old Boston Garden, which was quite. It looked like it was built in the 1820s, and I was in the third balcony on the very, very, very top, and I'll never forget it. But the reason I'm never going to forget it is because when you take a look at the way music works, there's three things that throughout geography, time, and culture have been extremely consistent around humans that light up both sides of our brain, which means that we will remember it, or we will learn from it, or it will impact the growth of our brain. One is music or singing. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's why Pandora was able to, in the early days, look at songs that impacted your brain and give you songs that would impact your brain. The second is dancing. And the third is storytelling. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting that those things have persisted and had such a big impact in relationship and innovation. But there's a physiological reason for that, because your brain likes it.
Yeah, I love that, and grew up watching movies like Star Wars. Let me see another one that I can tell you exactly what happened. It was like The Birds, Hitchcock. And in studying Hero's Journey narrative by Joseph Campbell's work and others, this story thing is huge for me. And I've learned that I communicate, and that's how I tend to live. I love story. I love your stories. I want to just riff on some things that came into my mind as you're talking about movement. I think I read somewhere that when you eat your dinner, the science behind genetics and things like the hunter gatherers were having to go and hunt and move all the time, right? And if your body wasn't moving, then the genetics would, and I may not be a scientist, but something to the fact that, well, we don't need this person anymore. We need to get rid of them off the planet because it doesn't look
Yep.
like they're moving. This is pretty amazing stuff. So my wife and I will have a dinner. We now do our 5K walk around the trails. We'll try to go out after dinner. You talked about sleep. I learned that through neuroplasticity when I went to the brain clinic about the power of sleep. So maybe you can talk about it. But one of my favorite books is called Why We Sleep. The author of that, I can't remember. But the thing that floored me in that book was right up front that in deep rest and sleep, I think it's the REM sleep stage. That's where the brain does a lot of its healing and the neuroplasticity
Yeah, that's
work.
right.
And when I was in the brain clinic, I just want to share this with you as a friend that I would go into the brain clinic and do drills to fix my physical problems. And then they would tell me to do 2 meditations a day and track my sleep. And so all of this taught me the power of sleep. And yet most executives that I work with, as one myself, would do dumb things like sleep deprecate themselves. So in that book, I'll finish with this, Blair. In that book, it says that we are the only species that intentionally deprecates our sleep. We
Right.
make those choices. It's crazy. All right, I'm going to throw a question back out here in Plato's Garden. I'm getting into mezzo, which is a sector. So you've moved between industries that rarely interact, in my opinion: aviation, entertainment, technology, AI. And what blind spots do you see in leaders who stay in one lane their entire career? And then you talked about, how do you work and lead with others? Any nuggets on that?
Sure. It's funny when you put the sunglasses on, I was thinking, well, maybe you're going to talk about Tom Cruise, because when I was at TPG, we bought Creative Artists and we also bought MGM. And as you remember, Tom got fired by Redfield, and we actually hired him. We started up TriStar. We brought him back in, and unfortunately for us, his first 3 movies were Lions to Lamb, Valkyrie, and some other one that I can't even remember. So we didn't get to Mission Impossible, fast enough before we bankrupted MGM. And when you were in the ACDC hat, when I was running PRG,
Yeah.
I
For the
did.
audience, PR.
ACDC was someone
Yeah.
we did their concerts, and my head music guy, who was actually was a road manager for ACDC, and he used to he'd tell me stories about them. And one of the most uh, interesting was, they were very active on stage, but they never went out. They'd go home
Wow.
and play board games,
Really?
because they were
Wow.
the brothers were very introverted, and that's what they did. They got out of a concert, they didn't go out drinking like you would think. They went home to the hotel and played board games. Again,
Hmm.
you can look at the public image, that whole, public image of who people are. That
Yeah.
doesn't tell you who they are,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, for sure. What's the Bono thing? You said you were just with Bono. What was that?
Luck, just luck is that Edge had his boat down in BVI, and it was my birthday. And one of my good friends I was there with him, Richard Branson. And so they came over for my birthday. So we had lunch.
That's very cool. Man, I mean, you mentioned things like PRG. The audience may not know what that is, but you talk about the company. There's so much to you. I encourage everybody to go to your website and find out everything that you've done. It's fascinating. I call this next piece of the team translator. So I read somewhere that your colleagues describe you as someone who can extract key points and make everyone feel relevant. So how do you build trust, Blair? How do you build that, and also with teams during these transformative periods where fear typically dominates, and how do leaders?
Yeah, look, I think it's a great question. Hopefully users will, because it goes back to your piece of how can you go from industry to industry, and what do you get out of that? Look, every industry has 2 things that are common. They have people and
Yeah.
they have patterns, right? And you can translate those across industries. You go from tunnel vision, which is doing the same thing and knowing how to do it, knowing all the people, and your neurons are, we're designed to go from complexity to simplicity, the ability to do it faster and faster and faster. And when you're in one industry, you become an expert. But when change happens and volatility happens, it's difficult because you find the innovator's dilemma. You see the risk in changing, because what has worked in the past, if you change it up, you may destroy the whole company. The ability to move from industry to industry makes you more comfortable that volatility and change happen, and that those are the moments. Those are the moments of innovation. Innovation doesn't happen when an industry is on a steady state doing well, because the major players make sure it doesn't happen, because they're making money. It's not a conspiracy theory. I mean, why would you want volatility? Bill Gates once said to me early in my career, he said, look, when Microsoft was trying to work its way up, we were the guerrilla force. But he said, I asked him, why are we doing this standard committee? Dude, you're an innovator, you're a radical. He goes, once you're in power, you put a lot of standards committees in place because you want to make it tougher for the other people to do the same thing you just did. Right.
Wow.
So this is what we do as humans. We go from complexity to simplicity, and we look at the patterns of business, and we have to find a way when volatility is happening to take advantage of it. One of the things I found early on with investing is that the best time to invest is when an industry is, at its worst, right? Because you're putting
Yeah.
money in at the bottom, and there's going to be change. So you ride the cycle up, but you also have a chance to take over the lead position in the cycle. So, my big thing in life has been, and again, it sounds like I know what I'm talking about, or at least I'm pretending I know what I talk about. But I'm learning every day. At 63, I sometimes think to myself, I can't believe how much I still need to learn. But I realize that if I look at my career, and everyone has their own story, I've really focused on fixing companies that were broken, restructuring them, and then growth companies. But if you look at those, you think those are on the opposite end of the spectrum. These companies are really in trouble, and these companies are doing really well, and they're growing, right? The reality is that's not true. They're exactly the same company. When you go into a restructuring, you need to go back in the history and figure out why this has happened, and talk to everybody. You also need to figure out how to get rid of 60% of the people on your exec team, which is the statistic. You will get rid of them in the first 2 years because you need to change it up, right?
Yeah.
When you look at a growth company, you need to go back and figure out who they are, and then you'll get rid of 60% of the people, because the only reason you're there is because they can't figure out how to double again, right? You're trying to figure out how to manage that growth. And if the people that were there were doing it, they'd be in a steady state growth, and they wouldn't need someone to come in and do the change. So for me, I'm addicted to the change. And I think the reason is not that I'm the smartest in the world, but that I have a skill. Now, maybe that comes from having a violently, driven alcoholic stepfather. Maybe it is because I had 8 brothers and sisters. Maybe it's because I transitioned every week from different households. I feel very comfortable looking at volatility and change and trying to find the pattern that can calm me down enough to help people,
I
right?
think
And
that's
so
fabulous.
I integrate information.
Yeah.
I don't invent things. People call me a serial entrepreneur. That's not true. I've never started anything, right? I'm
Yeah.
not a serial entrepreneur. I've worked with a lot of serial entrepreneurs, but the ugly fact about serial entrepreneurs, less than 10% of them ever have double hits. We like to say, oh, he's really smart, and he made this into a big company. They go to the next company and try to apply the same things that made them win in the company before, and they fail. 90% of entrepreneurs fail
Yeah.
after they win, and they fail multiple times, and 50% of them lose everything. Right
Interesting.
now, they're addicted to risk, and they're good at it. But you need both luck and skill to
Yeah.
be an entrepreneur. And luck, what I would say, my dad would say, whether be lucky or smart. What he meant was, if the market's going your way and you have good timing, you're not too early, you're not too late, and then you realize that you're smart enough to realize you're in it, and you double down and you work really hard, that's, luck was more important than skill. I know so many people who kill themselves, and they're really smart and good people, but they're not good at reading the market. They're always
Yeah.
too early, or they're always too late.
Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating. Everybody, we're here with Blair LaCorte. We're about 2/3 the way through the live stream today, and there's so much more to come. So many things. Every time you say something, it sends me on a journey. So I just want to reframe this. So what I just heard you say, you were talking, and then you talked about you all of a sudden brought in there. So there was like this protagonist, and then there was like a great story evolving. Then there was enmity that came along. It's the alcoholic, it's the eight step, what all these things that just popped in. But then the arc changed, and there was this hope, and that's classic storytelling. And I could just feel oxytocin flooding my brain at that moment, because I'm looking at you, Blair, and going like, man, just because of those couple things you said, being vulnerable, which most leaders don't share, I look at you and I go, I'm like that guy. And so that's why I want to stay a while for the next third with you. And that's a skill that you're really humble, but you're a very smart guy. But everybody, I'm doing this for a reason, sharing this from my observation, because you brought out of me that I kind of like you now. And this is a teaching moment, I'm thinking, that what you just did there, everybody go back and watch it, because I think blind spots is just my own view. I believe blind spots of leaders are correlated to the performance of their companies. I really believe that. And you said something interesting about guys don't have two hits or something. I was working with a guy as his general manager on a contract, and he was an older fella, and he, from back way when with his childhood, I brought it out of him. He told me his dad treated him poorly. In other words, he did something like paint a picture, gave it to his dad. His dad said, "Don't waste your time, throw it away." And he had that stuck in his head. I think on unfinished trauma, the brain tends to sometimes put things away, but some don't. Thoughts stay. And we would be in meetings, and this guy would bat people over the head, and just all of a sudden things are going well. He'd create problems. Well, we found out that through his business, he'd failed twice by almost bankrupting himself, which I learned through my own mental health therapy is an unconscious pattern where you can actually be doing well, and you can have these blind spots and crap in your wiring.
But it goes back to when I said this is the most important conversation that you and I are having.
Yeah.
This is the basis for everything is, okay, you've heard about vulnerability, and that's matching your, having enough trust so that people can see you, and that they can love you for who you are. We've talked about blind spots, having people in your life who will tell you that you're full of it. You get drunk and you're mean, and you need to deal with this. Or every meeting you cause crisis. The bottom right-hand corner of that Johari window is this unconscious unknown, and that's where most of our stuff sits, and most of our good and most of our bad stuff sits. And so everyone has trauma. The only way we learn, we need stress. Humans without stress die. Okay, if you don't have stress on your body, like I said, get 10 minutes of HIT up, your body doesn't grow. If you don't build lean muscle mass after age 50, you die. Okay, so you need to rip muscle, which means you need to cause pain. We need stress, right, to grow, but we just don't need chronic stress. So you have to have the cycle of how you stress mentally and physically, and how you rest mentally and physically. But the hard part is this unconscious unknown that we have sitting underneath us is all based on trauma, and some of it's constructive and some of it's destructive. I had a tough situation. Someone says to themselves, I had a tough situation when I was younger. I didn't realize it, but I'm driven by that. And that's the reason that I actually do what I do. I have the same, person could have a tough situation that is actually limiting to them because they're afraid. And they always shy away from this level of intimacy because they were burned. Now, both of them are who you are. And if you don't bring them to the surface, you don't have to change them. You have to bring them to the surface so that you can say to yourself, I'm doing this. Do I want to do it? Yeah. So if you don't marry your conscious with your unconscious, then you're at the whim of whatever happened to you and whatever caused trauma. Trauma is not bad. It's part of life. And in fact, what they'll tell you when you look at happiness is the people who have gone through trauma actually appreciate happiness. The people who actually got it easily, like winning the lottery, they always fail because they don't have an appreciation for what it is. So, we're very simple. But we're very complex in how we look at ourselves. We like to believe we're in more control than we are in, and we like to believe that we know everything about ourselves. And the fact is, I'm at 63. Every day I learn something, either from my kids or from my wife or from my friends or from the guy at the grocery store.
Yeah. There's a little applause for the guy at the grocery store. I got to just also bring attention to you again on the screen here, the amount of energy that's coming out of you. I'm going to riff back some things you said that made me think of some things. This thing about HIT, and movement, just because of you, I did this. And I want to ask the audience, listen, when you watch podcasts, everyone, what do you do with it? Do you just watch it and go on to the next one? Or do you intentionally take something that you learned and go apply it? So I listened to one of your podcasts you did before, and this HIT thing and movement came up. I have an inlet of body of water with trails where I do my trail walks. So I do a lot of movement, 5K a day. And in the middle is a field where the kids play soccer. So now I've implemented that where I cut off the trail to the field, and I do for 10 minutes sprints back and forth, then back on the trail walking, just because of what you taught me about HIT. That's very important. I love that a lot. I also want to just share with you that something about mental health. I think anybody who's ever gone into therapy will understand a lot of what we're talking about here. It drives me crazy how in the corporate sector, particularly at the top, and I'm not plugging it, but I did a TED Talk called How Leaders Can Lift the Stigma of Mental Health. All my career, Blair, working at that level, very few leaders create a culture of mental and physical wellness. They don't talk about their mental health. They don't know how to hold a room and say, hey, Blair, let's stop this meeting. Are you doing okay? Is everybody feeling okay? Is the stress level up a little bit? They don't create this safe space. So I like a lot of what you're talking about. I think your comments, I call it weaponizing. My toxic childhood turned into something I weaponized, and that's what you're teaching us today. On trauma, I just want to throw out the ACE test. Have you heard of the ACE test? ACE?
No.
So dig it up because I just did it. Adult childhood experience. It's 10 questions. And I had a neuroscientist tell me before, it's not an easy test to do. And like my therapist just told her, I almost aced it. I got 9 out of 10. The higher the score, the more trauma you've experienced going back into your younger years.
Sounds like the winner's curse.
But I think that should be on every scorecard of every executive leader. Do the ACE test. Identify if you've had trauma, what is it? And then go and learn what you're teaching us in terms of how you can hack and power the brain. So amazing what you're teaching us. I want to talk about your mastermind model. You co-founded an elite mastermind where members collectively generate, I think I read, hundreds of millions in revenue. And what patterns of success and destruction have you observed through that being with them? And tell us what a mastermind is. I don't think most people know.
Sure. And, it's a mastermind's just a tool, and it's a tool for connection and a tool for growth. But I do want to comment on what you said because I think it's very subtle, but I want to put a point on it. In business, we don't expand our Johari window because it's very inconvenient, and sometimes it's negative, right? To share too much personally, right? Which is why it's important to have some people at work that you can talk, that you feel safe with, but also people outside of work that you can talk to, because there's always a new group of people coming up. And, you don't want to show weakness. That's what we say. And so in meetings, people don't want to show weakness. And when you say, hey, I'm going to take some time off because I need to spend time with my kids, it's considered a negative. But in reality, you taking care of yourself is the best thing you can do for a company. Yeah. So one of the reasons I probably have the style that I have is because I'm a hard charger and I push really hard. But if I don't signal that it's okay to be human, then people will try to mirror me, right? And if they try to mirror me, that's not good for me either, because they're going to actually be hard charging all the time. If you were a coach of an elite athlete and you basically ran him 24 hours a day and you never gave him rest, and you never talked to him about how he's getting along with the other players, and you never gave him the space to evaluate why he's doing what he's doing, and for instance, session, why he feels the way he feels when he's doing something physical, that athlete would either burn out or would fail over time. Yet in business, we just assume it's a logical thing that we continue to push as hard as we possibly can, and that it's all about intellectual and it's all about winning. And that's just not true. So I just want to put a point on what you had said is that, stop and think to yourself. You don't have to show weakness and you don't have to be someone you're not. But if you don't signal it's okay to be human, you will end up in a business that isn't human. And those are usually not the businesses, unless you're in trading, that succeed over time.
That's brilliant. Holding up a book here, Carl Rogers, Client-Centered Therapy. I don't think I mentioned to you, but I'm in the tail end of doing my doctorate degree with the university in London, and I'm critiquing my public work, but I'm doing a lot of reading through transdisciplinary work. And in here, he has a framework. He talks about listen, empathize, accept people with unconditional positive regard, and daring to be yourself. In psychotherapy, when I sit there with my counselor, they don't really say much. And that what they're trying to do is get you to share, right? What I learned from this framework is unless I talk to Blair or you, or I have somebody else, like I have to be with another. And you said it before, that mental health evolves through other people. And so when I'm talking to you, if you're just a talking head about all your accolades and how great you are and your successes, Blair, and I've said this to people who want to come on my show, I don't really care. I want to find something in something you said where my brain goes, he's just like me. There's something he said that triggers something inside me. He's real. And that's what you were telling us, and you do well. And I know
but that's also what tribalism is.
Yeah.
Right. So if you really strip it away, we all want to be connected to someone who sees us, is like us, is safe, and it will make us a better person. And that's how simple it is. When you talk to people, one of my buddies who was Canadian was a University of Toronto, and he used to go and help people during hospice, help people pass away, a palliative care doctor. And after 1,000 people, he came back and he shared some of his research. And then I went out over the years and I've looked at a lot of research on what people talk about, not when they get hit by a bus and don't have time, but when they know they're going to die. And so if you were a business, you'd say, what's my strategy? What's my ultimate strategy? Well, if you're a human, your ultimate strategy is to exit. We're all going to die. Death is undefeated. So wouldn't we look about where we want to be? What's our profit? What does our business look like at the very end? And so there were things that he found that were very common that I've found that everybody talks about the same things. One, obviously, is denial, right? Why me? What could have I done differently? Why this happened to me? But once you get to acceptance, there's three things that tend to come up. One is, who loved me and who did I love? Okay, because again, all we're designed for is survival and love. The second was, did I even make a difference? Was anyone going to remember me? Why was I here? What was the point of this whole thing? But it turns out, at least in my mind, the third thing is the most haunting and it has the greatest impact on the first two, right? And that is, did I live an authentic life? An authentic life means, did I do the things I want to do? You heard the cliches. People don't regret the things they did and failed at. They regret the things that they didn't do. Okay, so living an authentic self is getting to know yourself well enough, sharing enough about yourself, and then taking some chances and connecting with other people. Because if you're connecting, you probably found someone to love, and someone probably loved you, and you probably made a difference in this world, and you will be remembered. Right. But that is very, very difficult to do when the opposite side of the coin is survival. And part of survival is being careful. And part of being careful is not sharing too much because I may get thrown out of the tribe. People don't realize that, that social comparison is one of the most positive and one of the most toxic things that exists in the amygdala, right? If you didn't have social comparison, you wouldn't be able to benchmark and compete and try to get better and have continuous improvement. But it's also a terrible fear because social comparison is in your amygdala to say, if I'm the lowest on the tribe, I'm probably going to be thrown out and I'll die, or they're going to kill me. So when a young girl goes on to the internet and she says, oh my God, I'm fat, she's not thinking I'm fat. She's thinking I'm going to die. And that's why it's so powerful. So there's back to this whole idea of reframing. You have to be human and you have to be authentic, and you have to own that sometimes I did something because I was afraid, because I was mean to that person in high school because I didn't want my gang to kick me out. And I consciously try to go back to people and to situations and actually apologize for things I did. because that doesn't make me a bad human being. It makes
Yeah.
me a human being,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I love that. That brings to a very touching moment to me. When my dad passed away in 18, I had coffee a few months before. And the first thing, I hadn't seen him all my life because he left when I was 12 from home. The first thing he said to me is, "How are you, son?" And then he said, "I love you." And then he said, "I'm sorry for all the things I did." And that exchange between us, man. And then this weight came off my shoulder. But when my dad died a few months later, unexpectedly, he had a heart attack on his own in his home. I have two brothers who never made peace with him. So that's a big teaching moment you gave us about saying sorry, about forgiveness. It goes both ways. I want to also just say thank you for the part about living life fully, and I call it being in service. You want to know what's interesting? I've never said this to anybody publicly, but since I had my brain injury, I shouldn't be here, really. I mean, I just came back close. I think they said I fell at the force of 47 joules, which if you're an engineer, you get that. I've been doing things, bucket list things, man, for the last few years. And you just reminded me why. Like AC/DC concert. I actually go into prisons now and I work with inmates. They read books and we record it and we send that to their children. I do that through my church. But these things just started becoming my way of life in the last few years because I realized how close I was to death and what contribution I didn't make. And,
Right, but let's just play on that a little bit because we're coming to the end here, and this whole idea of service is not charity. It's not charity
yeah,
because kindness actually gives you more back than you get. I know this sounds, oh my God, that sounds stupid. They're just trying
wow.
to convince people to be nice. If you look at the brain chemicals that you get when you're kind to someone and they smile, even if they don't say thank you, that kindness actually comes back double in your brain chemicals, right? And
That's
it
cool.
makes you feel more connected. So one of the experiments I try to do with my CEOs who are a little bit introverted is I say, listen, walk down the street and I want you to smile at people. Because again, this is about your brain. When you look someone in the eyes, it's an act of aggression in the animal world. So if you're walking down the street and you see someone and you realize you don't know them, you look down. You
Yeah,
can't stop yourself from looking down. I want you to keep looking at them and I want you to smile or I want you to say hello. And 50% of the people will actually react in a positive way. If
yeah,
you do that 10 times a day, you will reprogram your brain that the world is a much safer place. And you'll reprogram their brains that the world is a much safer place. There's an old Mormon commercial where someone holds the door open for someone and then if someone says hi to someone else and then that person actually picks up something someone dropped, that is reality. That is the energy of the world. And again, we're not going to stop trying to be safe because it's built into us. But our ability to open ourselves up just a little bit to be kind, like you're doing, that is changing the world. It's not just changing you, it's not just changing them, it's changing their children. And I can tell you that the world is not changed by the leaders of this world, right? It is changed by one person impacting two people, impacting four people. That's the way we get this to be a better world. And, I'm very passionate about it that, if I could have, my dad used to do random acts of kindness every week and we would meet on Fridays when I went to see him and we'd say, what did we do?
yeah,
And it changed my life because no one needed to know except the two of us needed to talk about it, right?
yeah. That's awesome. I think I heard someone say once, it's what you're remembered for what you do in private, not in public. It's these random acts of kindness. Very, very cool. Thanks for sharing that part about what the brain gives back to one. I wrote that down as a nugget. I didn't realize that. So that's amazing. I got one more question for you, and then we'll move to just acknowledging you a couple things here. So everyone, we've gone through the three areas of the story. We're now at, I call this global maybe, and maybe the bigger picture as we end. So let's see what I'm going to, you're training to be an astronaut with Virgin Galactic. I think that's true. And obviously through that, you might seek wisdom, or you might find something that's not here on Earth. This question is called the book unwritten. If you were to write the definitive guide to business transformation based on your unique journey, what would you title it? Or, what would be one truth in that book you want to share?
Well, President Clinton had this famous quote, which would say, "It's the economy, stupid," and it is. In the bigger sense, politics is all about how people feel about where they are and where they're going. I would say business is the reality is it's all about the people, stupid. And I'm not being, Pollyannish and saying, oh my God, we need to hug each other. I'm telling you that, and you said this earlier, business is just a sport. It's just a sport. 50% of the people wake up every day and have zero choices in their life. They live for at subsistence level. Another 30% of the people in this world today actually get up every day and they live paycheck to paycheck and they can't take any risks and they can't make a lot of decisions. They're just living and trying to survive through it.
Mhm.
And even of the 20% of us that have some capability, I would argue that 90% of that 20% don't take advantage of it, right? Don't have gratitude and say to themselves, you know what? I have the ability to make choices and to have impact. And business is just a sport. I know that
Yeah.
we get paid to do it just like professional athletes. And I know if we're successful, we get fame. But I've also spent a lot of time with some of the most successful people in the world. And you know what? If they didn't actually take care of themselves and build relationships, they're miserable.
Yeah.
They're on their private jets with their private islands, hoping their kids will visit them. And when I ask them, they go, well, I need to do this or my kids won't come. Okay.
Interesting.
So that's not the way you want to end.
Yeah.
Okay. We don't know when we're going to end, but I'll tell you, if every day you don't look back and say, you know what, today I was really harsh with my team because they needed it, fine. Tomorrow you may, be a little bit different, but you have to connect with the people because that's all you have. Now, again, people will come back and say there are some certain things that are on the 1% level that I'm a trader and I'm doing that. It's true, right? But for the most part, all of us live in a world where how we relate to everybody else makes a difference.
That's awesome. So that book title might be Business is Just a Sport. I love everything you said. I'm going to put another camera on the screen as we move to the last piece and wrap up here. Actually, I was just curious, like you talk about some of these celebrity status people, or they call them celebrities that you've met. Did those connections and relationships happen as a result of you creating your platform like Masterminds or the companies you work for where you were able to find those people or they saw value in like, because the average person doesn't always get to meet some of those type of people.
Look, I think that I have an old saying that relevancy rules, which is meet people because you're relevant to them. Now, sometimes you meet people because they're in the business, and Bono, needed his concert done, and we designed the concert. And when Spider-Man was struggling, we went and helped him fix it. That's relevancy, right? It's business
Yeah,
relevancy.
I see.
But after you're relevant to someone and you actually get to meet them, you have to decide whether there's something more. And then that's where real relationship starts. Relevancy isn't bad. It's just a way that we work with each other to get some things done. And it's, they're, sometimes it lasts, sometimes it doesn't. But what I've found is I pick the people that, whether they're a celebrity or not a celebrity, that bring me joy. And I try to maintain that relationship. Sometimes it's harder with people who are celebrities because they have too many people trying to get their attention. There's too many people who make money off them, and there's too many people that find joy
That's right.
in this transitory thing that they think is fame. But the people that that maybe live in that world that I still hang out with, they don't hang out with me because I'm a celebrity,
Yeah.
and I don't hang out with them because they're a celebrity. You
Well,
hang out
that's
because they make you feel
yeah.
like a human being.
No, that's a breakthrough for me. I'll hang out with you any day, man. I mean, the connection that we've made here. I don't like fake people. And interesting, Bono. I got somebody told me to listen to his audiobook. I can't remember the title, but it was just out, and he actually narrates it. But he has his guitar, he plays a bit and sings through it. It's a story of his life, which I did not know. And that guy's life is like yours. It's fascinating. Last thing I want to do here is acknowledge with you with 4 words. So they're on my paper here. I write them down unscripted. They just come out of me as I listen to you. The first one is wisdom, difference between time and knowledge, wisdom. 2 is passionate. You got to watch yourself back. You probably know this, but you're humble. Holy crap. Passion all over you, which drives me. 3 is maven. If anybody knows the book Outliers,
Right.
if you meet somebody who's a connector and a maven, those 2 together, these are powerful people. Well, I believe you're a connector. Maven is, if you want to find out about this topic, the things that you've talked about, you're the guy. And then 4, it's resilient. I think your life and your story and you're teaching us how to be resilient with our own lives. So thank you. And now we're going to give you an award. Did you know you're going to get an award today? Probably if you looked at my other shows. You know what challenge coins are?
Of course I do. In fact, I have a set on my desk right now.
I bet you do. Well, you're going to get another one. So I won't bother telling the audience, but these originated in World War I to commit community between people who carried them. So I try to put this up at the camera. I had these minted and done in the U.S. Raised letters. The front is the emblem of the show. The back, I'm biased, but this is the story narrative, the hero's journey narrative, modeled after Joseph Campbell's work, which is what exactly.
Who by the way, I love. And look, you know, the challenge coins, if you really go back far enough, started with the Greeks. And I think they have tremendous impact because they are all about connection, and the things on the coin matter. If someone did it right, they matter to who they are. And it creates a bond between people. Now, in World War I and World War II, especially when we had Allied forces, we had challenge coins that showed that we were in this together. But when you talk to someone, I was just with a couple of my friends from SEAL Team 6, and when you talk about someone who really actually gives challenge coins because they matter, it's a ritual. So thank you. I take that as a very positive, and I smile the fact. It does not surprise me that you see the ceremony and the passion and the meaning in giving something of yourself to someone else.
Yeah, well, congratulations, man, for being inducted into the Quiet Warrior community. We're in 19 countries with the platform here, and there's just about just a percentage of these that are floating around out there. As I give this back to you to finish, I will throw this out, comment where we can get a hold of you, find out more about your work, and then tell us this. What message are you still afraid to deliver to the world that might be your most important one as you leave us today?
Yeah, well, listen, you can get a hold of us at, a PPE Mastermind if you're interested in coaching, and there are videos all up there free, and you'll get to see. I bring my friends in to speak, and every time we have a session, I am humbled by the wisdom. We probably have $1 million worth of speakers every time we have a conference, and they all come in for nothing. We donate to their charities, so they're there because they care, and you'll see when you watch the videos. The second is you can just get me on LinkedIn. And I think that, the message that I don't know if I'm afraid to deliver, but I think has to be delivered by more people is that, it is really up to us, and this whole idea of impact someone positively every day. And that's the way culture changes. Culture changes because you do a small thing that leads someone else to do a small thing. And then every once in a while you can do a big thing. But we're not gonna be able to hit home runs every day, but I can tell you, we can make a difference with someone's child. One of the things I do all the time is, if anyone asks me to sit down and talk to their child, it's, parents can do a lot of things, but after 12 years old, 75% of the influence is them looking at their external environment. And so they are designed genetically to actually look for people outside their family to listen to. So, if anyone ever asks you to sit down and talk to their kid for a couple minutes, it's one of the kindest things you can do.
Oh, that's a fantastic idea. Well, everybody, find that true purpose like you hear from Blair. Live the life that you deserve and desire. And Blair, it's been a fabulous time. We'll have you back again. Thank you for being here.
No, listen, thanks for having me. And I really enjoyed our conversations.
Fantastic. And everyone, we'll see you next time on the Quiet Warrior Show. I'm Tom Dutta.
Thank you for listening to the Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca.
Okay, I'm going to take us offline. We're still online. And